Today, Henry Cameron Allen is a certified grief and survival counselor and the host of the Lost Traveler podcast. From an early age, Henry was steeped in a world of cultures and has been deeply influenced by their wisdom in his career as an artist, educator, mentor, and parent. Surviving cancer, overcoming obesity, living with physical disabilities, and facing the unimaginable loss of his beloved 13-year-old son to brain cancer in 2008 taught him invaluable lessons in courage, empowerment, and integrity. I'm so glad to have Henry on the show today because I know he will share not only his wisdom, but also how he overcame all the adversity he faced in his life and how you possibly can do the same. So, without any further ado, let me get Henry onto the stage. Hello and welcome, Henry. I am so glad that you are on the show today. I can't wait to ask any of those questions. But first of all, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm doing really well. September is here, and the weather where I am in Spain is starting to cool a little bit. Summers can be pretty oppressive here, and so there's not much even going out. I can't even walk my dog because the pavement is so hot; it'll burn his paws. But yeah, I know the weather is lovely now, and
I hear you. It's the same here. I mean, I'm in Florida and I can't wait for the weather to cool down a little bit. I
yeah.
know some listeners who are maybe further up north think differently about it, but for us, yeah, it can be brutal. The summers can be brutal. So you are American, right?
Yes, born in the States. I was born in Washington, D.C. My father was a cultural diplomat, so we traveled the world. I had such a privilege to visit different countries, live and be immersed, steeped in world culture, not
Yeah.
only in the countries we were living in, but we attended international schools. And so my friends came from every corner of the globe, and
Isn't that
we're still in
beautiful?
touch, many of us. Yeah.
Yes. Can I know from my own personal experience traveling the world is one of the best things you can do if you have the opportunity or give yourself the opportunity to do so, because it opens up your eyes and gives you different perspectives and you can listen to other people. And the one thing I've learned, and maybe you can agree with that, is that we all have the basic human needs and we all want to be happy, we want to have a roof over our head, and we want to have friends. And I think that's a unity that combines or connects really the world cultures, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know from our past conversations that my overarching life purpose is universal life skills education. What are the skills that every single human being on the planet, over 8 billion now, what are we learning and applying every day in one measure or another? It's not a question of whether we're learning these skills, it's how well are we learning them and from whom, and how are we applying them and seeking to augment our proficiency in those different things. And one of the things that I learned growing up around the world is that we are more alike than we are different, and
Yes.
the media will guide us in particular ways. And this is since the 60s and 70s. This is nothing new.
Right.
To keep people fearful, to keep people somehow diminished in our humanity. When you look at the school systems globally, it's all about dehumanizing, and it came about in the Industrial Revolution where children were taken out of nature, off of farms, and put into factories. They were being prepared to be factory workers, and maybe not so much now, but it's definitely training for corporate America.
Yeah.
And it's to be sort of a cog in the wheel rather than being a fully realized human being.
Right, right. And it's definitely not an easy topic to grasp it, how um, human humans are being or sometimes being controlled. But I think where we are right now on the other end is there is light, and there are light workers like you. So
Mhm.
I want to go a little bit deeper into what you do. But before we go there, why don't you tell people what you do currently, and then I want to go into your story, because we had a conversation. I know your story, and it's all about overcoming adversity, and really also grief, because you as a grief counselor can
Yeah.
talk about that. So tell us what you do right now.
Well, I have this image that came to me in a dream that is like a triumphal arch. We've all seen triumphal arches. Many cities around the world have them to celebrate a war victory, usually. But this image came to me where it had three pillars supporting the arch. And the arch for me represents, what is my overarching life purpose? Why am I here? What is my vocation? The voca that calls to me and from me, and that informs every aspect of my life. And that is universal life skills education, as I said. So the three pillars that support my purpose are my passions. And one of them is mental health. As you said, I'm an internationally certified grief and survival counselor and therapist. And that work in mental health has been a driving force in every aspect of what I do. Um, Another passion of mine is philanthropy. And it's not necessarily about moving money. It's really about how do we elevate our humanity and how do we provide platforms for people who are marginalized or may not have had a platform to speak their truth. And so I provide that. I have a podcast myself, which you've been lovely as a guest on, and it's the Lost Traveler podcast. And then I do charitable work in that pillar as well. I do a lot of charitable work. And then the third pillar is art. And my art is, not only am I a theater artist, I have an international audio theater company called the Folklore Theater Company. And we have people from all over the world, voice actors, writers, contemporary writers, engineers, sound designers, and we're coming together to, in a sense, save the stories that are dying with the people that carry them, our primordial human stories. And this ties into all those other things, right? Because there are stories in the West that have never been heard in the East, and there are stories from the East, certainly, and indigenous cultures that we've never heard in the West. And so to find those common threads through our storytelling, which has always been part of our humanity, to identify those common threads and weave whole cloth out of them, I think that affects, not only, obviously it gives a platform for voices that have not been heard very much, but it also supports mental health. And so I've allowed my passions under the arch of my purpose to sort of inform and bleed into one another. And those are the main thrusts of my work today.
I love it. I love that you talk about those three pillars and this over arching vision that you had, and it really all works together. And I know we discussed that on your podcast, the common thread that we have as artists. I was a performing artist, singer,
Right.
songwriter, producer. I wrote musicals and shows, so I know how impactful that can be, helping people and just making them laugh, think, cry, whatnot. And the one thing that I want to talk about before we go into the work that you do is really your experience that you had. Um, I mean, with starting with yourself in your youth, that you had to overcome many different things,
Yeah.
ending up with the death of your son. I mean, that must be the most devastating experience in anyone's life. And for some people, they just stop living.
Yes.
Now, having you here on this podcast, I would love for you to share with our listeners here how you dealt with that, and showing them yet there can be a way out. So please, if you would mind bringing us back to those moments in your life where you really were, or you felt you were at the end, but you got through there
Yeah.
and became your next best self to help humanity.
Yeah, well, grief is a universal life skill. That's one of them that we're all going to meet at one point or another, in one measure or another. And it doesn't have to be over the passing of a loved one. It could be over a change of life situation, moving to a different country, for
Mhm.
instance, or, changing homes or changing jobs, whatever. And, I look back at my biography and I see in hindsight the skills that I've been able to build proficiency in, given just the flow of everything. I remember when I was living in Vienna in the early 1970s and attending the international school there. And I think I was in second grade. So that was about 8 years old. And my teacher, Mrs. Fend, which I love because it's like fend for yourself, kid. She gave us a homework assignment to focus on what is your greatest fear. And I remember sitting there with a blank sheet in front of me, and I couldn't think of anything. I wasn't a fearful child. I mean, I had been almost trained to be fearless, and I wasn't afraid of the dark. I wasn't afraid of bugs or snakes. There was no monster under my bed or in my closet. And so I really struggled with that assignment. But what ended up happening, and I know this because my father kept everything, and one year he sent me a big packet of homework assignments from my entire childhood. And this essay was in there, this paragraph. And at 8 years old, the only fear that I could identify was outliving my children.
Hmm.
I always knew I would be a father somehow and call it a premonition. But I think that holding that fear for the majority of my life, and then having survived cancer myself as well, when my son was diagnosed, Cameron, with brain cancer, my having survived cancer prior to his diagnosis relieved him of any fear around it. My papa's a survivor, right?
Mhm.
He used to say, I know I want to survive this, but if I don't, I'm okay with that because I'll be able to help even more people. He used to say it's like the last scene in Star Wars where Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader are in their final battle. And Obi-Wan says, if you strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. Now, I was one of the original Star Wars nerds. And of course, I passed that tradition on to my son. But that became part of his psyche, so that when he was faced with his own mortality at age 11, he turned to the folklore of our time
Mm.
and of our circle, our sphere. And he was able to find hope through that. He said, I want to survive this, but if I don't, I'm okay because I'll help even more people. I feel the same way as Obi-Wan Kenobi. If cancer takes my life, strikes me down, I'll become more powerful than anybody can imagine, and I'll help even more people. And that's actually what has manifested. The greatest privilege of my life is introducing Cameron to the world through me. I don't feel, as many people will say, oh, what a tragedy. I look at his life as a triumph.
Mm.
I don't
Yeah,
look
I
at
like
his
that.
death as a tragedy. We are all going to go. Cameron used to say, Papa, nobody has an expiration date on the bottom of their foot. We're
Right.
all going to go. Nobody knows the day, nobody knows the way. And so that was reassuring to me because, of course, I didn't want him to suffer. I didn't want him to leave the planet selfishly. I felt like, I was there to be his superhero and to save him from this
Mhm.
scourge that I survived. It was a different kind of cancer that I had. His was unrelated. His was not hereditary. And so after he passed, I, of course, went through, even when it's expected as it was, you do go through a period of shock
Yeah.
because your universe has exploded. I recently became a first time author, and I wrote a book called The Lost Traveler's Field Guide. And it's all about navigating the grief journey through a quantum lens. So I took quantum physics as a metaphor for the grief journey. And dimension zero in quantum physics is the Big Bang. It's when everything exploded into being, as far as we know,
Hmm.
and
Now,
it changed
I'm
everything.
interested to know, understand, and I know that our mind, we can conceptualize things and we know things. However, when something starts to happen, like that transitional period, and you feel that loss, we still are in this human body and experience that goes through that grief process.
Yeah.
So, how long did it take you? And was there a time where you finally could say, "Okay, I went through that grieving process"? And what did you do to combine the one thing that you already knew that
Yeah.
was here in your conscious mind
Right.
with the body emotional experiences?
It didn't take me very long. I think that because I have a bit of a different way of looking at things, um, of course, I went through my mourning. And what I realized coming out of my mourning period was that there's a very distinct quality difference between mourning and grieving. Mourning is a temporary passive state. You can do nothing with it but be in it. And anyone
Mm,
who's experienced the passing of a close person to them understands that difference, and that feeling of helplessness and of sort of regulating, where am I now? Who am I now emotionally? Um, and it does affect your physicality as well, of course. And so when you cross that thin membrane between mourning and grieving, while mourning is temporary and passive, grieving is permanent and active. It's not something that you will ever get out of. It's not something that will resolve itself or that can be healed from. There are some things that time does not heal. The process itself can be healing, but there's no healing from grief, I believe.
mhm.
Um, there's no, one day you wake up and, oh, I'm not grieving anymore. Everything's fine. I'm back to normal. No, you're changed forever. And I'm not the person that I was before his passing. And for many years, I would say about 15 years, and this month is 16 years since he's been gone. Um, I thought that my joy had left with him. So for 15 years, I felt joyless. Not that I'm not a happy person. I am. I'm inherently a happy, light person. But I didn't feel like I experienced joy in the same way that people do. I felt great satisfaction in bringing joy to others through my work. Um, but I didn't really get that sense of joy until I had this epiphany, call it, that, and this was as I was studying quantum mechanics in preparation for my book, um, that death is an illusion, and what we call loss is only a loss if that's how you perceive it. I really want to help change the lexicon and the way we talk about grief. I don't feel like I lost anything. In fact, I feel like I've gained so much. My son is not a set of keys or a favorite scarf. I know precisely where he is.
Mm,
He's right here in my heart. He lives in me, he lives through me, and he's very much alive. He's just in a different form than he
right.
was when he was in the physical. And I think that can be applied to whether it's a parent or a pet or a child or a friend, partner.
Mhm.
Um, and so I don't really experience it that way. I don't experience it as a loss. And I always cringe a little bit when I hear the word because I'm like, you don't get it.
Yeah.
It's not that. That's not what it is. We're calling it something that we've been programmed to call it, right?
Right,
Our
right.
go-to is I'm so sorry for your loss.
But that's why you are here, because
Yeah.
through your experience and through that whole experience, you're now able, and also what you studied and with the book that you wrote,
Mhm.
to show us a different perspective. Because at the end, this is what it's all about. This is what life is about.
Yeah.
We hear and see different perspectives from people, and there's always an evolution of how somebody sees it or experienced it or discovered it. And that's what makes life interesting. But there's another thing I want to talk about, because talking about joy and what it is and how it feels like. You have a service dog
I do.
that is giving is a source of comfort and strength for you. And I know I have two dogs myself,
Yeah.
and they show us unconditional love.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. They are happy when they see you again. So tell me your experience. So what kind of service dog is Animo? Is it his name?
Animo. And that is an expression in Spanish that I learned here. I had another service dog whose name was Flat Stanley, and we were together 7 years. We traveled to 14 countries
Mm,
together. He, for me, having been diagnosed with complex PTSD, and the SD I don't call a stress disorder. I call it spiritual development, post traumatic spiritual development.
love
Um,
it. I love it.
but and then I'm also physically disabled. I've had multiple back surgeries, and that stemmed from child abuse in my foundation years, and caused progressively worse problems in my back. And so I had to have multiple back surgeries, which damaged the nerve in my leg. And so have some weakness there. I have a lot of numbness and tingling. And if I overactivate the nerve, it'll get very weak. And so for a service dog, for me, not only does it help mitigate my triggers and things, but it also helps me with balance and going up steep stairs, or getting up out of a low chair, or even out of bed sometimes if I'm weak.
Hmm.
So it's amazing, it's miraculous. And Animo, well, in January, Flat Stanley sadly passed away after kissing a toxic frog.
Mm.
And we're in a rural environment here, and there's a kind of frog that was introduced to help take care of other pests. But it turned out that the frog was toxic to animals, and it can spit its venom up to 6 meters. And so
Oh my
if it gets
gosh.
into the eyes, nose, mouth, any other mucous membrane, there's no antidote, and it takes them very quickly. So that was devastating, because he was essential medical equipment, right?
Hmm.
That's like if somebody set fire to your oxygen tank,
Mm.
or broke your wheelchair. I mean, that really was what it felt like. So I had to remedy that situation immediately. And of course, I'm in a very remote, tiny village in the middle of nowhere here in Spain. And I had friends in England. There's a lot of rescue dog exchanges between England and Spain for some reason. But so she was looking, and she found this dog, a year old, in Gibraltar, at a shelter there. Now Gibraltar's 4 hours south of me, and
Hmm.
I don't drive, so I was thinking, oh, that's kind of a haul. But I could tell from the photos and the videos and the description of the dog, and in talking to the shelter keepers there about him, that he had the right temperament, he had the right personality, the right size. He was only a year old, but he was already about 80 pounds. I mean, he's strong. He's a Mastiff Lab mix. And when Flat Stanley died, everyone in my village came to my door to hug me and bring me food. I mean, and
Oh,
culturally, they handle mourning very beautifully. And the expression when they hug you is animo, animo. And animo means what you said. It's strength, it's encouragement, it's chin up, and better days are coming, and hang in there, and all of that. And so they gave me his name.
oh wow.
And so I called him Animo because he is my Animo every day.
Oh,
A service dog is your Animo. It helps you
right.
navigate the world. It keeps you, if you're feeling low, he'll come and put his muzzle under my hand and make me pet him, or bring me his toy or a bone or something and want to play. And so, yeah, and he had no training. He had been in a kennel his entire first year of life because he was a
Oh,
little foundling puppy when they brought him in, and they only got 30 minutes outdoor time a day. He had
mm,
never been in a house, certainly had never been in the countryside. And to bring him here to this beautiful place that's in the heart of the countryside, into my home, he never once had an accident in the house. He came with some kind of ultra sensory knowledge about what I needed. And I have a feeling that Flat Stanley is sitting on his shoulder, whispering into his ear, this is what you do as a service dog. This is what you have to do. When you go to the cafe, tuck yourself under the table and stay still for an hour or two. And he did it. He does it amazingly. We go to restaurants. Yesterday, I took him to the supermarket. He's walking by the cart. He wears a harness that says assistance dog.
mm-hmm,
And, he doesn't jump up on the meat counter, or stick his nose in the dairy case or anything like that. He's
mm-hmm.
just so composed. And when the harness goes on him, he's a changed animal. He's working. He knows it. It's
Wow.
instinctive. And he always walks on my left. That's my weak side. And
Mm-hmm.
so he's always there to help me with balance. Um, yeah, there are some things that just can't be trained, and he's got them all. He's got
Yeah.
all the qualities, and his size. He's about 100 pounds now,
Yeah.
and he's hefty and strong, and I'm
I
six
love the
three.
story. I love the story of Animo. I've never heard
Yeah,
of it, so it's just beautiful how he got his name.
yeah, yeah. Very special.
Wow, this was just such a great conversation,
Yeah,
and I can't wait to learn more about you. I know we are connected on an app. That's how we get to know each other. It's really and I wanted to plug that quick here.
yeah.
It's an app that connects people on a different level. It's different than social media.
Right.
It really brought wonderful connections, and it grew my circle of influence and even business. So, if anybody wants to learn more about it, I'm going to have a link in the show notes to just check it out. And the best thing is, when you click that link, you get automatically a bonus of $10, so you can use that app to experiment with that app. And obviously I would help you to navigate through it. So check it out if you are a solopreneur, entrepreneur, online marketer, and just want to connect with like-minded people.
Yeah.
This is the app for you.
Owwll.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Henry, for sharing your insights and your vision with our audience. And maybe I have to invite you again because there's so much more I want to talk with you about. But we in my 30 minutes of time that we have on this podcast, I think what you shared today was very impactful and
Thank
also gives people hope that, yeah, there is a difference between mourning and grieving,
you. Yeah.
and that mourning period is important, but it's then over. And thank you also for sharing that epiphany that you had, where you all of a sudden can experience joy again. And when
Yeah.
people understand that and have that, anybody can get back to life and joy even after losing a loved ones. So thanks so much for sharing.
Thank
Now,
you.
if people maybe they want to get in touch with you because they felt, you may can help them through their grieving process. How can they do that?
If they go to Guy, hyphen wire, WIRE.org. Do you know what a guy wire is? You've seen them. If you drive by a construction site
Uh-huh.
and there's a wall that needs extra support as the cement is drying, there are these cables, these
Okay.
temporary cables that offer temporary support while the structure is sort of finding its own core of strength. That's
Ah,
kind of the purpose I serve. I'm a support that holds you up, during unstable times. I lend stability during unstable times,
I
and
love it.
so it's not just around grief; it's about anything really. But that's where people can go. But if they just go to my main website, they can access anything. We didn't even talk about theater, but
I
next time we
know.
will.
So we're
And
going to
that's
do
just my
it
name.
another time.
HenryCameronAllen.org, all one word, no hyphen there. HenryCameronAllen.org is my main website where they can access everything that I'm doing.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, and all the best for you. And we're going to talk again.
Yes, part two. Looking forward to it.